Hey YouTubers, here we go for the Intrepid. This is the brand new power steering rack. There's a core charge. The old one is worth $81 to them. It comes with some new O-rings here that you're going to want to put in for your lines, and it gives you some recommendations for how to prepare to put it in with flushing the system out and everything. One of the things I want to show you want to keep is this bracket and these two nuts. This is off the old system. It won't come with this, so if you take your core in, you'll lose these, or bolts. And you keep your bolts in your bracket and reuse those. The first thing that we'll do on reinstallation is that we're going to have to flush the power steering system, and I'm going to try and do that with air, and I'm going to work on that a minute, and then I'll show you what I've done there, and then we're going to go into the reinstallation, and we're going to make it as quick and detailed as I can, but I'll show you on reinstallation on a 2001 Dodge Intrepid ES on how to put the power steering rack back into it. Alright, what we're doing here is we're flushing the lines out. You can see this, but you can blow through one hose and it creates pressure. It goes everywhere, but there's not much any better way to catch it. We've got the cardboard down there, just slowly putting pressure in and taking the fluid that was in there out. It's making a mess. I'm going to have to find a better way to catch it, but you get the idea. If you had a damaged power steering rack that was slipping gears, obviously there could be metal in the fluid. You're going to want to flush the system out before you put the new rack in. And that's the best basic idea on how I have to do it. Definitely an easier way. Just find an empty bottle that will fit down in here. Put one end in the bottle, then gently use the air pressure to push all the fluid out, and then you can catch most of it in the bottle. I got a lot on the floor and a lot on the frame. You don't want to make that big of a mess. But I'll hose it down and everything before I start the car. So we've got the system flushed. We're ready to get the rack in there. Okay, reinstallation on the Dodge here. I'm just going to do some quick points on things that may be a little bit different than disassembly. As you can see, I've got the rack worked back in here, and that was just the same as taking it out. You got to be careful. This end down here is plastic, and you want to make sure the rack is centered, but all that doesn't matter right now, really. What you want to make really sure of is that you have your spline lined up going into your collar correctly. There will be a flat spot on the shaft, and then on the inside of the collar there is a flat spot where you line it up. And it goes back on fairly easy. What I've done is I went under the dash once I got it lined up how I wanted it, and I just tapped it in a little bit, and I'd take a picture with my phone. I can see how far it has moved when I go back, and I'll tap it in a little more, and I finally worked it to the point where it's the place on the shaft where there's an indentation for the roll pin. The roll pin I've gotten started, but you cannot get a hammering tool down in there. It's impossible. If you do, you're going to be hitting it at an angle. There's just no room to reinstall that pin. So what I'm doing is I've taken the end off of a C-clamp, and it kind of fits right there on that pin, and I've moved it a pretty good little bit there, and it's getting pretty hard to turn, but I'm just slowly pressuring that pin back in there. You can't do this to remove it, but this should work putting it back in, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, technique is what it's all about. What I've done here is I'm pushing the pin in from the bottom. I got the widest surface of the C-clamp, pressing on the pin, and it's become too much pressure to turn. But you can take something like this, put on there, and it'll give you leverage to turn it. You kind of have to hold the clamp into place, but this seems to be the best method for putting that roll pin back in. It's just as hard to push in as it was to bang out. But I think that's the best idea I've come up with. All right, now since we've got a roll pin back in, we want to make sure that we get the steering rack centered. And how you do it is you take it all the way one way, and this end is up, and then you count how many revolutions you make all the way to the other side. Divide it by 2, bring it back to the middle. Okay, so that's not an exact science. It went, I think, 3.5 turns one way, so I came back 1 3/4 turns from best I could tell. And then I went under the dash, and it can only go one way. If you're close, it should all line up, because the splines can only go in one way, and then the attachment to the steering column can only go one way. So at this point, I've got a couple of boats started here, and the steering wheel is exactly straight, so whenever I straighten the wheels out, everything should line up. Alright, we've got everything finger tight bolted back in now, and the wheels came out straight, which is nice. Worried about that, along with the steering wheel. I have to go back through and tighten everything up, but I wanted to make sure everything fit good. You want to make sure that boot seals well over your gear housing there. And getting these things in was kind of rough. You got to make, it's hard to find the bolt holes exactly, and then I had to kind of knee the tires and get them turned. But as long as that if that flat spot on the shaft is straight up when you put it in, that's where you want to keep it for alignment. It came out of the box just centered, but it only goes in one way, so it's kind of hard to get it off unless you really turn it, all the way around. So that's where we're at now. We're just going to go back through and tighten all the bolts, and then I'll put these lines on. We will start putting fluid in. Alright, the power steering rack install came out good. It's really surprising how well it handles and how tight it is now, having replaced that. So it was successful, and it made a big difference with the new struts and the new power steering rack. It handles really well now. I know I cussed it when I was working on it, but not a bad car. And as you can see, it's time to move on to the next one.